Okay, it says the other one is joining.
Morning, everyone. Hope you're well. Thanks for joining us. My name is Sarah Gibbs. I'm a Standards Development Manager for BSI. And today we're going to be discussing accessibility and BS 30417, the provision of inclusive PPE. I have two wonderful panelists joining me today. If we can go to the next slide, please. Firstly, we have Meg Ginsberg, who is the Assistant Project Manager at Atkins Realis, and Gemma Bailey-Smith, who is a Sustainability Manager at Lang O'Rourke. You can both give an introduction to yourselves, please, Meg.
Perfect, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name's Meg Ginsberg. As Sarah says, my day job is working for Atkins Realis down in Exeter. And I'm also the founder of Constructability, which is an initiative to try and get construction more accessible for everyone. Thank you very much.
And Bailey?
Yes, hi everyone, good morning. I am Bailey. As said, I work as a sustainability manager at Lang O'Rourke. I've been working in the construction industry for coming up to 7 years now, and also support Meg on constructability and work as well in kind of workplace inclusion and accessibility too.
Thank you. And thank you both so much for taking the time to join us. We really, really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation, just to let you know. Can we have the next slide, please? Brilliant. So can you both describe how PPE has traditionally been like for you in your construction roles? What's affected you? What kind of experiences you've had? That kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. Bailey, if you don't mind, I'll start us off. So I started working my job and I was undergoing medical operations. I was on crutches. I wasn't a full-time wheelchair user as I am now. And it was very much pick your size, small, medium, large, tick the box, and it comes over to you. And managing that was really difficult because a lot of it was very heavy, baggy, didn't fit right. When you're trying to, use crutches or mobility aids on top of that. And then as my mobility was changing, and then I sort of was transitioning into more of a full-time wheelchair user, it was that adaptation of no one really asks if the PPE is still all right for you, just expect it to still be the same size a few years later. And very much it just became really, really tricky just to be independent and just simply get around. Very much getting caught in wheels, sort of arms being pushed out because of the amount of stuffing and everything that was in there. So yeah, definitely very tricky and challenging, and I won't say a lot of support available at the time.
Yeah, really similar to Meg. I'm also a wheelchair user and experienced kind of here's the standard. This is what we have in the stores. This is what we have like available. We might need to order like a smaller size, etc. But other than the size itself, there wasn't really any other option than that. Okay, maybe slight style changes, but no real adaptations that would make it easier. I also have a medical device, so I'm attached to a feeding tube 20 hours a day, and just kind of navigating that as well and trying to make sure obviously all the PPE is still on and correct and compliant, but also making sure that that isn't really uncomfortable. And I think again with the fastenings and things like that, it's all very off the shelf, all very standard. And so actually, like myself, I have dexterity issues, like sometimes that can be really, really fiddly. And again, especially young in your career, really early days, it can be really kind of challenging to speak up and say, oh, actually, this doesn't really work for me. I think especially when they're like, oh, we need to order in smaller gloves, I'm quite petite, and like, oh, okay, yep, we need to get a smaller size. And then to say, oh, actually though, like, is there anything better, can be quite a difficult conversation. And again, just having that off the shelf, as Meg said, pick your size and kind of hope for the best, hope it works for you. Which, yeah, it doesn't always work for everybody.
which kind of goes into my next question about why a one size fits all approach. Why doesn't that work? Do you have any opinions on that, or?
I think personally it's one of those people vary day to day in themselves. So if you have got an ambulatory wheelchair user on site, they might be in crutches one day and in their chair the next. So if you're trying to design for everyone, you know, that's never going to happen, because people in themselves vary. But it's very much, it's whether the voices have been considered in the sort of approach when they're actually building these PPE, designing the sizes, etc. And I think probably up until now, they haven't been, because it's very much, oh, no one in construction is disabled, or no one's got additional, you know, need or support. Whereas actually people are sort of waking up finally and being like, well, actually it's quite a large part of our workforce and we need to recruit in as well. So how can we make this safer for everyone, and therefore make sure they're comfortable and able to independently just do their jobs? And it's that simple as PPE allows you to do your job safely. So finally it's brilliant that these conversations have a bit more light, and hopefully that it will sort of start a revolution, and you know, more people will feel comfortable in that area.
We won't start singing, you know, from Les Mis or anything like that
I
anytime
nearly
soon.
did
But
then, so you're lucky.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so
sorry.
disability aside, like bodies are not standardized, like there isn't a one size fits all in any approach. Then add in disability and accommodations and adjustments that need to be made. I think, you know, we've all been there, kind of, you just buy something off the shelf and you're like, oh, it fits to a degree, but actually I prefer like a cropped fit, I prefer, you know, the sleeve slightly shorter. But then when you're talking about disability for wheelchair users, you know, a crop design is actually really important, because if your coat gets stuck in your wheel, you're going to be catapulted out, to be quite honest with you. That's not safe. And similarly, if you had limb difference and then you've got a long dangling sleeve, that's not safe either. So, you know, disability aside, one size fits all doesn't work, full stop. But then when you add in disabled bodies and disabled people, actually then it's that safety question that kind of crops up a bit more than just, oh, making do with a bit of an uncomfortable fit. Like the safety aspect really comes into play.
It is a brilliant point though, Bailey, and I think that's why when you're looking at female PPE as well, and how that's had quite a lot of support, which has been brilliant. But you know, if someone's pregnant, then going to breastfeeding, and their body is constantly changing, and therefore we need to have that PPE provision to be able to support that. And I think this, obviously this webinar will be focused on disability in our lived experience, but the inclusion in this new standard is brilliant because it brings everything together and sees individuals rather than just male, female, able-bodied, not, etc.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think you've kind of already answered this, but do you think it's important to have examples of a range of PPE users? I think you've kind of already gone over shape, gender, disability. We do need to think more about neurodiversity and everything like that, kind of different materials, skin sensitivity, and even down to like how task-specific differences. Bailey, you mentioned about dexterity and everything like that. How do you get around that? How do you make your PPE work for you with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of backtrack where you've said around like bringing in that example piece. Again, as autistic ADHDer, sometimes opening, well, what do you need? Like a very open-ended question. And especially when you haven't seen example, it's like, well, I don't even know what's doable. I don't know what's possible. So to say, well, what do you need? Sometimes, you know, I was like, what can you do to PPE? I don't know the full ins and outs of what is required from that safety perspective, but I know what works for me outside of work. So I favour crop tops, for instance, and cropped coats so it doesn't get caught in the wheels. So I think there is a really good example where you can kind of go, yes, here are some examples that have worked for some people. I think it's just making sure that employers and individuals as well don't think, a wheelchair user needs this, because that is not the case. No two disabled people are the same. No two disabled people's needs are the same. Meg and I are both wheelchair users. We'll have some needs that overlap, but equally we'll have some very independent needs that need to be accommodated. So I think having that almost like like a brochure or just suggestions of like those case studies of I had PPE adapted in this way and this was really helpful, because there will always be those overlaps. And yeah, around kind of dexterity, and just again kind of making what you have work. I think firstly it's really important to say that the world isn't designed for disabled people. It's not designed with us in mind, and so we become very good problem solvers very quickly because we have to kind of make whatever we're dealing with work. So a really good example I'd say is for the zips, rather than having kind of, your very standard, quite difficult to grasp zip, you can get basically kind of like a keyring adaptation. So you kind of can click it on and then it's got a bigger loop. Little things like that. But again, if you don't know that's available, I know it's available from outside of work, and, living for 11 plus years with various disabilities. But again, like if you don't know what's available, or you're like, I actually don't even know how I can start to adapt this to make it work for me, it's so difficult to then kind of work out what does work. So I think, yeah, really important to also be aware how we're asking questions, because for neurodivergent people, open-ended questions can be overwhelming, or just kind of like, I need more context. Can you be more specific? Like, what are you actually trying to get as the output? And then again, kind of showcasing different adaptations and how people have managed in their own lived experience.
That's
right,
brought so much.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah. No, I was just going to add, yeah, definitely it goes into more of a solution focused conversation. And I think it's really important, Billy touched on it beautifully, because we as individuals don't know all the answers, and it's not always on us to find those solutions as well. So then it needs to become more of a collaborative conversation, and you need to feel safe enough to have that discussion as well. But it's really important, because yes, you can come into the construction industry disabled, having long-term medical conditions, etc. But a lot of people become disabled, or have big changes while they're working in the job. So if you're then coming to ask these people, what do you need? What can we give you to help? Brilliant that's there, that support. However, they're going through their own changes themselves, and it's very, very different to what they might have experienced before. So I think it's just a key part to say, I don't know the answer, you might not either, but let's do this together. And having examples is brilliant, because you go, well, actually, let's try that, let's do this, or could I ask them for some more external help as well?
And again, just to add to that, I think to employers, the message is you also don't have to have all the solutions. I think around adjustments, there's often a lot of fear of thinking, I need, like, as an employer, you need to have the answer. As Meg said, we don't always have the answer. So I think like that fear and that trepidation around adjustments, around whatever it is, both PPE and in the workplace, it needs to be that collaborative conversation, as Meg said, but you need a safe environment to do that, and to kind of both feel empowered to have those conversations. But I think, a big message to employers is also, don't think you need all the solutions. I think, in construction, we are a very solution-based industry, and that's great because we can kind of have those conversations, workshop, think around it, and kind of get to a more accessible and inclusive solution.
I think it's also important to mention that, employers don't necessarily have to have that solution very, very quickly. It may be a case of you try, it fails, but try again and keep trying until you do get it right, because otherwise it's so disheartening on both sides, for both the end user and the employer. And it's don't give up. Definitely don't give up on it, because exactly as you both said about problem solvers, natural, amazing kind of solution providers are there in your kind of grasp. Make use of it. So which takes us into kind of thinking about the practical considerations on site for you. Taking medical devices, how does that work with your PPE, your mobility aids, sensory impacts, donning and doffing for yourselves without having to have somebody there to help you? What kind of considerations have you had with your PPE for those kind of elements?
Haley, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, no worries. So as said, I'm kind of connected to my feeding tube 20 hours a day. So if I'm out on site, that needs to come with me. Again, it's kind of making sure that I have a very kind of close to my body like bag that can't get attached to anything, that is, you know, safe to my person, and making sure that, again, it's not impacting on the PPE as well. And in terms of then like the wider picture of like sensory, I think, at least for me, a lot of the time it's very off the shelf PPE. And I guess a workaround is making sure that I have layers underneath that are sensory friendly and will not kind of irritate or overwhelm me. Soft fleeces are always a good go-to for me. But again, just trying to also regulate temperature that impacts both sensory as well as physical disability. That's quite a big one. So making sure that you have appropriate PPE for all weathers is really important too. And I guess I touched on it as well with the adaptive kind of key rings to help get items on and off. I think obviously if you need support, absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. But I think in the workplace, and for me at least, my experience has been very much kind of that need to almost overprove, to be like, yes, I am disabled, and yes, I belong in this industry and in this workplace. And it's something, I think, yeah, a lot of internalized ableism, a lot of kind of disability in the workplace, and also being a young femme presenting person, like, oh, there's so many layers there to kind of unpack. But I think it's that, you know, I want to be as independent as I can be for as long as I can be. And, you know, if I can get a jacket on and off because there's a small adaptation to it, that's great. And that makes me feel more independent, more confident. Whereas having to like ask a colleague or a support worker to kind of help me out is absolutely fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. People need that support. That's okay. Some days I need that support. But I think it's just having kind of being empowered to make that decision of actually, with adapted clothing, I can get it on and off myself, and like how important that is to individuals in the workplace, especially. It's a really important piece of the conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so insightful. Thank you, Bailey. Meg, have you got anything to
Yeah,
your own
I've got.
experience?
I mean, when I started, it was fully DIY, get your scissors out. And to some extent, I kind of loved it because it was the team coming together to think, okay, what could we do? So I always say when I'm in my chair, I'm the size of my 5-year-old daughter, and it's a black chair. You know, it's in terms of visibility, safety. I'm not going to be seen on site. So what could we do then to help that? And in terms of the PPE, it's like, well, actually, could we just, you know, cut up an old high-vis jacket and wrap it around the back? And it's just simple things like that. I think the communication's a massive aspect. Yes, you've got the PPE, but actually it's when I go on site, also make people aware, this is me, this is what I need help with. And that links with the PPE. Just be aware, please, that this might be slightly different. And then we had really brilliant conversations. And we're really fortunate with Atkins Reals. We've got a PP full group, which I know you've worked with previously as well. But it basically is an amazing team of people who just want to help and try and find solutions to people and allow them to work. And we sort of had a think, and then I've worked with a designer, and we've sort of come up with more of a changing robe style high vis jacket. So it means that I can sit on it, keeps me covered, keeps me warm, but it doesn't mean I then have to wear the trousers. It doesn't mean I have to take the top off and get caught. And I think hygiene's a big thing. So when I used to work on the sewage treatment works, and trust me, you don't want any of that coming into your car, coming home with you. So it was one of those, how can I strip off quickly, get into my car and feel clean and safe? And that was, again, having that space and that comfort to be able just to literally independently and with dignity be able to just do my job. And like I say, Bailey, if you need help, there were typically a lot of people there to help, but personally, with what I can do, I just want to be able to go in a dark corner, strip off and go home quickly, and that's really important as well.
Yeah, it's
Having
having
those
that
options.
autonomy, isn't it? Yeah, the autonomy to go, actually, I want to sort myself out and want to just crack on with the day, or having that option to go, okay, yeah, is there a support worker or someone available to support? I think like autonomy is always a huge part of kind of disabled people's experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is a case of who do you think is responsible traditionally? So this is, I'm very specifically saying traditionally here, for what happens when the PPE doesn't work? Who do you think is responsible for sorting it out? Meg, you've kind of alluded to taking your scissors out,
Yeah,
which
it's
horrifies me working in standards, because I kind of think, oh no, the certification has gone. But
it's
you
one
know,
of those. But there isn't currently a standard for wheelchair protection in terms of on site. So yes, I'm wearing the correct PPE, but my chair isn't covered. And you look at the wider picture in that individual. You know, that chair is my legs. I am very, very restricted, and mentally affected if it's not there. So I yes, maybe I should have caveated that with everything else was perfect, but it's hard. I think a lot of the pressure is on the user, because again, it's always that expectation we have the answers. It's the expectation we should be able to raise our voice if we've got any questions, or if some things aren't working. But I mean, it's not always possible. Some people, don't necessarily want to have that communication style, or can't. I feel very fortunate I could have that conversation with someone, but that's one person, and the whole point of the standard is it's about that inclusivity in everyone. And that's something that's brilliant about standard. I know we'll go into that later, but it's very much this is it opens the door to have that conversation. So if you suddenly do have those issues, you go, oh, have you seen the new BSI standard? Could we speak about this? And it kind of bridges that gap. So you don't have to be the one that's causing problems, or needing extra work, or I don't know, spending more money on the cost code, etc. It's just you doing your job and working to keep yourself safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly that. Oh, sorry, Sarah.
No, Bailey, you carry on, please, because obviously you know more about it than I could dream about.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think with a lot of, if it's workplace adjustment, PPE adjustment, a lot of the onus tends to fall on the disabled individual, which kind of, as I said before, depending on where you are in your career, depending on what kind of privileges you own in the workplace, that conversation can be very different, and equally who you're approaching. If it's someone that kind of just doesn't have time for it, or you're like, oh yeah, they'll brand you as, kind of Meg said in air quotes, the problem person, the person that's always raising, oh, actually, this could be better, this doesn't quite work for me. And again, like past experience as well in employment can have a huge knock-on effect. If you've worked somewhere where you spoke up and said, oh, like could we do this? Can we look into a PPE jacket that actually fits me a bit better so I feel safer at work? And they've kind of gone, oh, again, oh no, don't worry, like the standard, this is to standard, so it's fine, rather than kind of hearing you as an individual. That can really impact kind of how your then like next employment experiences go. And if you feel kind of safe and comfortable to speak up and ask those questions, but kind of as Meg said, where it falls to like the individual, of course, that's such like a case by case situation. Where we need to go, and where this standard is helping us to go, is to embed that into the processes, so that again, those conversations are standardized. They always happen, especially when we think most people who are disabled have like non-visible disabilities, and so actually 1 in 4 people are disabled. So that's a lot of the workforce. But if you're not having those conversations, and you're not creating an environment where people can have those conversations won't happen, and people just muddle through, get their scissors out. I also have cut holes in pockets, Meg, to get my feeding tube out, so it's kind of more tucked away. But again, like then people end up with this kind of, we'll just do what we can do. Whereas if we actually have these conversations, embed it into the standard, embed it into our processes, then we can make sure that everybody is safe going to work and doing their job.
I should also confess I have been guilty of altering my own PPE in previous life before. So I will say I know exactly why and everything like that. I was given a boiler suit meant for a 6'4" man. I'm not that tall. I wish I was, but I'm not. So it was a case of either rolling up the sleeves and the legs or chopping it off. So completely, I know exactly why we do it, and it's just a case of exactly why we brought this standard in, of why it needs to be looked at and addressed. But thank you both for that. It kind of goes in. There's no silver bullet here, and why is that important that we acknowledge that? Why is it important that we say that there's not one simple solution to this?
I think personally, from my perspective, the current baseline of inclusivity within the PPE and that sort of safety on site areas, from my own opinion, very low at the moment. And this standard is going to do a lot to raise that bar. It's going to do a lot to have those conversations, as we mentioned, and for people to see what's possible and see those adaptations and how easy it is and how you get to that point. But as you mentioned, Sarah, it's not just this is going to fix everything, because there's always going to be something else. There's always then going to be, okay, if we've done this now, how do we make sure that's policy? How do we make sure that the smaller companies can also access it? You know, how do we, and there's always progression within this area, because there is always more diverse perspectives to bring into the conversation. And I think that's a really key thing, is this is a fantastic element to go, right, this is what needs to be done now. Let's have this conversation. But next year, let's have another one with some new people and let's hear what they think. And then next year, let's continue to raise this bar, because you know we have to with safety, and we're always trying to improve it generally. So why wouldn't PPE and sort of accessibility in that area be a part of that?
Yeah, I think,
Bailey?
yeah, like everyone would love a silver bullet. Everyone would love oh yeah, we've done this, we've covered it. It, you know, one and done, brilliant. We've got this standard. This is inclusive PPE. It's accessible to everybody. But as we've said multiple times, you know, everyone's access needs are different. Everyone's support needs are different. So, you know, there are definitely adaptations that can help kind of certain groups of people or people with certain access needs, but there isn't, you know, one piece of clothing that is going to work for absolutely everybody. And I think when we have these kind of conversations, acknowledging that is so important, so that we can kind of say, yeah, it's a process, it's continual improvement. We love that in the industry. It's just the same. We're applying kind of the same thinking around it all, as Meg said, because things change, people change, needs change. You know, there's so many different variables here that it isn't just yeah, let's get it done and tick it off. But again, it opens up the conversation and kind of has that continual like cycle round of reflecting, improving. And as Meg said, yeah, it's so important to bring in so many different perspectives and, you know, make the whole conversation more diverse, because, you know, those individuals that need the accessible PPE will have their own needs. But I think again, it shouldn't, saying there isn't, you know, a one fix solution shouldn't deter people, because there's so many ways we can improve on this, and like so many steps that we can do and have a really positive impact on so much of the workforce.
And if it's all right, I might add as well, and those small impacts do make such a difference to the people. Like it honestly can improve your quality of life incredibly. It can improve your confidence, you know, as we've mentioned, the independence, the dignity, all of those aspects just by those small differences. So the
Yeah.
standard really, it promotes innovation in that sense, because it's saying, we know where we are here. I mean, for all we know, in 10 years, we're going to have a suit that custom fits our body and has really cool I don't know, but do you know what I mean? There's always something that's going to come through, new material, new fabric, new designs. So we need to be keeping up to that pace as well.
What do you think about those that say it costs too much to have inclusive PPE?
I think I'd say it costs quite a lot of money as well when people have incidents at work and they're off and they're not safe. It costs quite a lot of money if people change job and you lose that person, so you don't have the retention. I think it costs quite a lot of money if people then on sick leave due to mental health reasons that implicate from the job. I think people shouldn't have their value based on a number that they need for basic safety provision. And actually these solutions don't have to be that costly, as we've mentioned. They can be creative, they can be dynamic, and actually that it should never be an excuse not to do the right thing, pretty much.
Meg has nailed that response.
I know.
I would say kind of working in sustainability, we get this a lot around kind of the topic as well. But again, like the impact, like, you know, you can't put a price on that. And again, it's about making everyone feel welcome at work, feel a part of the workforce, feel included, feeling safe. So, you know, if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, it's just really important to do the right thing.
I think I'm going to make a poster mixing both of your quotes up and put it on the walls to say to everyone going forward, because that was just exactly why we've done it. And it goes into, do you think this standard's going to change culture on construction sites?
Hayley, do you want to start this one?
Yep, of course. So standards won't change culture on their own, but what they're really good at doing is giving people leverage, and it gives disabled workers or like the procurement teams a point to go, you know, this is mentioned in the standard now. Actually, what can we do to improve, whether it's like our procurement lines or if it's actually the PPE itself? It's a lot easier to start that conversation when you go, oh, there's a standard that backs this up, rather than just kind of going, oh, hi, can I have a jacket that's cropped, or I need this change for my access needs. You know, culture in construction has changed so much, even in the, you know, short 7 years that I've been in the sector, and will continue to change. I think it's just making sure that we keep it pushing in the right direction, and this standard opens those conversations. So the standard itself won't change the culture, but us talking about it, us understanding it, us putting it into practice, you know, employers making sure it's part of their process, part of their procurement, that's when the culture shift really happens.
Mm-hmm.
And echo everything Bailey said. And I mean, this webinar to some extent is the, you know, the proof, the evidence that it's already changing things, because we're having these conversations and the BSI are promoting it and using their voice to amplify others. And it's exciting to see what's going to come of it. And, you know, that sort of movement towards the change forward, and help people feel valued and safe in their own PPE.
Absolutely. I'm going to combine two questions here for you. What are you going to say to your employers about this standard, and how would you advise others to approach their employers about this standard?
I can start us off. As I mentioned before, we're really fortunate, and I do feel lucky that we've got already a group sort of at the centre of this, where they're already aware of it, they've already promoted it and shared it to managers, but there's always more that can be done. And yes, you can have a very loud posse, but if they're not heard by others that are a bit further away, then, you know, the change isn't going to be spread. And especially when you've got these global organisations, it's okay, brilliant, you're starting this in the UK, how can you make sure everyone's safe, then looking at colleagues abroad as well. So very much I'm going to make as many people aware of it in the company, and I would hope that the company would support that as well, and sort of make sure there's at least a few press releases, a few articles, and just that general support and understanding that they hear what has been said and they acknowledge that yes, this is the change that needs to happen and we're going to be behind that.
I would definitely say, kind of to my own employer and to other employers, that again, you don't need to have all the solutions. That is not kind of the expectation of us or of the standard itself. It's exactly that. It's that starting point. It's having those conversations. It's working with, you know, the suppliers of your PPE as to how can we make this more accessible. You know, it's step one in this kind of more inclusive and accessible and adapted kind of PPE journey, as cliche as that is. But I think, again, kind of working in the sustainability team and working really closely with procurement, it's just making sure that this is part of the conversation. Again, working in sustainability, sometimes it can be, you know, sometimes it's a challenge to make sure that sustainability is considered in all of the processes and procedures. But this just needs to be added in there, because, again, if the people that are sorting out the procurement don't have like an oversight of this standard, it's not something perhaps they consider, they don't know what they don't know. So it's just making sure those conversations are had with the right people at the right time. If you know a PPE contract's being renewed, raise it with the procurement team, make sure that that conversation is being had, so that then, yeah, there is that room for improvement and to actually get all the benefit from the standard itself.
Absolutely, thank you. for you both personally,
Yeah.
why do you think BS 30417 is a step in the right direction?
Go on, Meg.
Oh, okay. I think it fills me with I can't even describe the emotion. It makes me feel seen. It makes me feel like I'm not the only one who's having these issues. And that, as we mentioned, I'm not the only problem. I'm not the only one, that's having to make these changes. And that those with the ability to change the processes, the governance, etc., are also sort of having to be forced to listen. So I just think it's a brilliant massive step in the right direction, and completely sort of in awe of everyone who wrote it and put it together, all the working groups, to get to this point, because it is a massive milestone.
Yeah, and I'd add to that being disabled, physically disabled, visibly disabled, a wheelchair user in construction can sometimes feel quite lonely. And again, not feeling seen. When I first became a wheelchair user and was like, oh, I want to work, in an environmental setting, had done work experience previously in construction, kind of before I was a wheelchair user, was just like, I have no idea how this is even going to work. So to then have like a documented standard that is saying this needs to be considered, absolutely, as Meg said, it's very validating. It's you feel seen, you feel welcome by the industry, because it's actually saying we need to think about this. And again, it kind of shifts that responsibility from the individual to also the employer, to the PPE providers, rather than, as Meg said, and I definitely experienced early on in my career, feeling like the problem, feeling like the person that's always got something to say, because the world isn't designed, for us, as I've said before. And again, that yes, okay, like culture, people have a really big impact, but so does like systemic ableism as well. And if the systems aren't set up appropriately or with disabled people in mind, you're always going to be kind of excluded by that. So to have this as a very formal, very, documented standard, it just feels like, yeah, such like okay, we're making real progress here now. Yes, it's just the start. And I think especially with, change around this topic, it takes a long time. It really does. And that impact it has when it's not quite right on the disabled person, it does have a really big impact, because this isn't just in our work life, this is in all of our life. Like our whole day is kind of governed by the systems that aren't accessible or inclusive. And I'm sure Meg's the same. When I go to work, I just want to get my work done. I don't need to be fighting, inaccessibility while trying to do my job. So to have this as this is what we need to do, this is the conversation, this is the starting point, is a really huge step. And as Meg said, I think just from a personal reflection, it's more that, oh, okay, people are listening. People are listening and hearing what we have to say and how we can improve on accessibility.
Yes, thank you both. Last question, I promise. What does the future look like for inclusive PPE for you both? And I can't say that we'll get one of those suits that magically fit everyone, Meg. So
One day. I guess for me, it's those standardized approaches, so everyone experiences the same treatment, everyone has the same ability to ask for the adaptions or the the needs that they require, and for it to be checked upon every year. Are you happy? Is there anything else that we can change? And I think for it to become it's that positive narrative, it's that value piece, it's the, as we mentioned, I'm coming here to do my job. It's your responsibility and mine to keep myself and others safe. This PPE guidance and standard will support that, because it allows us that step to know how to do that. But let's continue the conversations and work together. And I hope it's just, I hope it's an area for just creativity and people being able to have that community space to be able to go, I've had these issues, can you help? Because I know you've had similar. And I think that's just a really lovely thing in construction and all the areas that PPE need, that we can sort of rally together and keep pushing this forward as a sort of united group.
Really?
I think to like, yeah, think of the future of what kind of inclusive and accessible PPE looks like. I kind of think back to 19, 20-year-old me entering the industry, you know, as a very new wheelchair user. Like I would have loved just, it sounds potentially like, I don't know, a bit silly, but like just having, yeah, an equitable PPE experience, just being like, yes, I need this, this, this. You know, you get a form, you tick off what you need, but on there are adapted options. On there is, you know, do we need to like think about actually custom adaptations, not just, you know, adaptations that would work for a wheelchair user, for whoever. But just, yeah, like the simplest of like processes, and like just like the experience that so many people in the industry have. I would love for disabled people to have that too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, both. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's actually been so insightful and giving me lots of ideas for future standards. So yeah, don't be surprised if I'm knocking on your doors sometime soon going, right, Meg, Bailey, what do you think about this? Is it plausible? How do we do that? So yeah, thank you. And can we go through to the next slide, please? Thank you. So thank you very much, both. Like I said, really, really appreciate it. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to see that we did have a 10-minute bill presented in Parliament on Tuesday, the 24th of March by Kirsteen Sullivan, the MP for Bathgate and Linlithgow. Made sure I had that in the right order then. To actually use the standard as a basis for the procurement processes going forward for government, you know, everything that they do. So that's very great. If we can get the next slide, please. Thank you. So yes, we do need to point out that the standard itself is free. There's no excuse not to. And we have the link there for everyone. We have a companion guide to help you introduce that standard into your everyday procurement process. We have another webinar for Inclusive PPE for women in construction, and the second reading of that 10-minute bill I just mentioned. But if you are interested in any other further events at BSI, obviously we're very interested in PPE because that's all important, but there are further events that may be of interest to you. Have a look at the BSI events calendar there. Thank you very much for joining us, and hope to see you all soon. Thank you.